Welcome. On behalf of the District Board of Directors and staff, I welcome you to the Clovis Veterans Memorial District. My name is Lorenzo Rios, CEO of the Clovis Veterans Memorial District, your district. I am honored to welcome you to this significant event. Many stories, one mission: help, recovery, hope. Today we gather here at the Clovis Veterans Memorial District in collaboration with the Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health and the VA of Central California to address an issue of paramount importance: veteran suicide prevention. In our nation, the statistics surrounding suicide are not just numbers on a chart. They are stories of courage, sacrifice, and service. Every day, we lose heroes who have stood in the face of danger to protect our freedom. They have served their country, and now it's our turn to serve them by addressing this pressing issue. Let us take a moment to reflect on the stark reality of the situation. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reporting in 2020, a staggering 6,146 veterans died by suicide. Suicide was the 13th leading cause of death among veterans overall, and shockingly, the second leading cause of death among veterans under the age of 45. These numbers are not just statistics. They represent sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, fathers, and mothers. They are individuals who have selflessly served our nation, carrying the heavy burden of their experiences long after their uniforms have been laid to rest. But here's the thing: today's event is not about dwelling solely on the starkness of these figures. It's about our shared vision, our shared mission: help, recovery, and hope. It's about making sure that every veteran receives the support they need and that every story of despair is replaced with one of hope, healing, and resilience. Our collaborative partnership with the Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health, a mouthful in itself, and the VA of Central California is a testament to our collective commitment to changing these statistics. Together, we aim to provide the vital resources, counseling, and support networks that can make all the difference in a veteran's life. It's about creating a community where our heroes never feel alone, where they know there is help, and where they can find the path to recovery and lasting hope. As we move forward today, let us remember that we are here to raise awareness and take meaningful action. Every conversation, resource shared, and connection can save a life. Let this event be a catalyst for change, a moment to renew our dedication to our veterans' well-being. Thank you for being here, part of the solution, and joining us in this critical mission. Together, we can create a future where the stories of our veterans are filled with resilience, recovery, and hope. I'm a veteran of 23 years, and I am proud to be here with all of you as we work together to make the change and make a difference in the lives of all of our families. One is too many. Let's make sure we start counting the different direction where we keep more of our veterans alive and we have these resources to share. And let's get the word out. The most important part is let's listen, but more importantly, let's take action. Let's get this information out to our public. I want to also take the moment to say thank you to all of the resources and support organizations that showed up today, including the Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health, River Visa Behavioral Health, Central Valley Suicide Prevention Hotline, Community Regional Medical Center, Narcon Resources, Hines Hospice, Loss Team, NAMI, Department of Veterans Affairs Suicide Prevention, IPV and SUD, West Care San Joaquin Valley Veterans. As you can tell, it takes a whole team to make this happen. Now, let's go ahead and do some traditional things that here in this district we take very personal, and that is making sure that a flag that all our veterans have fought for is properly honored. And so I ask if you are able to rise, please rise for the presentation and posting of the colors by the Fresno State Air Force ROTC and the national anthem being sung by Valerie Salcedo.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. A round of applause for Fresno State Air Force ROTC and Valerie Salcedo. Now, before I bring this incredible young man up here to get the program going, I want to also make mention in our facilities, the Central Valley Veterans has done some remarkable work, and some of you may have been in attendance today for the Veteran Stand Down. Well, it'll be here again tomorrow, and we have resources in the facility that are here to serve you and to help our veterans connect with resources from the VA and a myriad from DMV and other programs. So I encourage you to come in. We'll be open again tomorrow at 8 a.m. They're providing meals for everyone. There's plenty of great resources to come in. So I want to encourage you to, if you're a veteran, come on in. If you're a family member, come on in. If you know of a veteran, encourage them to come in. And once again, it's about connecting everyone to these resources, and it starts by making them aware of them. So now it is my distinct privilege of bringing up here, please welcome Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health's Division Manager, Ahmad Bahrami. Where are you, Ahmad?
All right, folks, we're going to keep this really short because we want to be able to get to our storytellers tonight. So I just wanted to say thank you to the Clovis Veterans Memorial District for allowing us to have this event here again. Great partners allowing us to serve our community as well as our veterans. I just want to do a quick recognition for some of our folks that are here, including Mayor Pro Tem from City of Clovis, Vong Mua Nua Tua. Hopefully I got that right. I practice it all the time. I try to get those right. I know we had Supervisor Madzik from District 5 here a little while ago. I think he ran over to check some of the finishing of the stand down. And then we also have representatives from Supervisor Buddy Mendez's office, District 4, so I want to thank them for coming out. But with that said, we're going to dive right into our presentation tonight, which is the stories, right? The theme of this event is many stories, one mission, that mission being hope. And so we put together a short film. We're going to have two local storytellers, veterans, who are going to share both a little bit of their experience and their work, but I think what's really incredible with both these storytellers is I think if you would ask them, have their dream jobs today, which is actually the work that they do on a day in and day out basis actually helps other people. Veterans helping our community, so they truly have found their calling and service. And so we're going to feature their stories of hope and resilience, and then after that, we will get to our keynote. So with that said, I don't know who cues it up. How are we doing this? But we're going to do a screening for the first time ever of a short, we'll call it a short documentary, many stories, one mission. Thank you.
Started off, I grew up in a very small town called Barstow, California. I grew up in a kind of a dysfunctional family. Lived in about an 18-foot travel trailer out in the middle of the Mojave Desert. You know, so the only other option was if you didn't get on at one of the local trucking companies or the railroad or one of the military bases, you know, you didn't have many options. So I wanted to get out of that town as quickly as possible because I needed the discipline, you know, and I told myself I needed the discipline, you know, because my behavior was kind of rowdy back then, you know, kind of wore out my welcome in my hometown, and thought the Navy was going to solve that for me, you know. So I joined the Navy in 1991, ultimately became a hospital corpsman. I was also an anti-terrorist weapons specialist. I worked with everything from handguns to Stinger missiles, shoulder-launched Stinger missiles. But, you know, my behavior that I was trying to run from at home followed me all the way to my duty station. You know, I was a top-notch sailor for what I was doing. I was real good at my job. I was the top of the field, but it was my behavior off base that got me into trouble. It was my behavior when I wasn't working that got me off trouble. Lots of drinking, you know, lots of partying, infidelity, you know, ruined my first marriage, you know, kept, you know, having issues over and over again because of my behavior. You know, my master chief would call me in. I'd end up in the captain's office. They say, you know, you're a great sailor, but you just need to get your life together. And I never quite understood that, you know. I would think, well, I'm good at what I do, you know, let me in, let me stay in, you know. And when I was in, you know, I eventually got deployed. I was deployed on the USNS Comfort hospital ship. We ended up in Haiti for what was called Operation Uphold Democracy. It was a strange situation because we were receiving a lot of casualties from actual Haitian patients that were coming on board the ship. One that really struck with me was a 6-year-old boy that was brought in. We brought him in. By the time we got him in through surgery and got him into the ICU and the PACU, or post-anesthesia care unit where I worked, he had bilateral hemo and pneumothoraxes in his lungs. He had, both his legs were broken. Both his femurs were broken, both arms broken, hepatitis positive, HIV positive. Worked on him about 12 hours a day in the ICU. We were able to find his mother, who was also sick. We were able to reunite them together, and bring it to him. But that changed me, seeing a little boy, a little 6-year-old kid, who not only was ran over by the UN food truck, come to find out, but he was also trampled by the crowd following the UN food truck. So it's just that knowing that those things are happening in the world. I'm 24 years old. I had no idea these things were going on. So when I got back home, it kind of changed me a little bit. And I started partying again. I started trying to, solve my problems with alcohol and pills. And, it wouldn't fill that gap inside me that I felt. That's when I think things started going kind of downhill for me. Throughout my life, I started getting involved in drugs and alcohol until about 2008. I kept myself employed as a chef throughout all that while I went to school. And I barely attended school, even though it was paid for by the VA. Barely got by in school, maintained a C average. It was just one of those things I was trying to escape, everything that, resembled anything of responsibility in my life, And then later on during that time, my father became ill. He had cancer, got real bad, and he eventually took his own life. Which was one of my first experiences dealing with suicide, other than having the thoughts in myself and dealing with it myself. It was the only time I ever dealt with suicide. So I had all that guilt and all that shame built up. As like, this is my job, this is what I was trained for. I was trained to save him. I was trained to be there for him, and I couldn't do that, And even around that time too, the next Gulf War was breaking out. They wouldn't allow me to re-enlist because of the mental health issues I was having. So I see all my guys going where I should be. I should be in that, I should be there. That's what I trained for. That's where I should be, And so I had a lot of survivor's guilt. I guess that's what they call it, survivor's guilt, knowing that I should be there, but knowing that my behavior and, knowing that me ignoring the fact that these doctors are telling me that I'm exhibiting symptoms of bipolar, these doctors telling me that I've got brain injuries and concussions, and not wanting to listen to them because I didn't believe them. My master chief would call me in, I'd end up in the captain's office. They say, you're a great sailor, but you just need to get your life together. So eventually I got out in 1996, honorable discharge. Despite my behavior, I was able to maintain an honorable discharge. I finished up my associates and started working with at-risk mental health patients. I opened up a board and care in San Diego. I worked there for a couple years. Then from there, I went to work at a brain injury facility, which was also a drug and alcohol facility. But the brain injury facility was for former NFL athletes. So I worked with them. I was an inpatient coordinator. Got a chance to work with some great former athletes and help them through the process of what they're going through the NFL concussion lawsuit. So we were a big part of that. After that, it didn't fall through so much, but after that, I decided that it was time for me to move up to Fresno. Cost of living and things like that in Fresno, and plus we have family up here. So it made more sense for us to come to Fresno. And as soon as we get up here though, COVID hits. So finding a job wasn't going to be as easy or as simple as what I thought it was going to be, So we rode COVID out, applying for many jobs, interviewing for many jobs, and then David from Kingsview calls me and wants to do an interview on, one-on-one interview with him and one other person, Carla, and I nailed the interview. They said they wanted to bring me on and that I had a good spirit, and they wanted to put me in this position to help others, And I'd done this, part of my job at the reach facility working with athletes is I'd take their calls at 1 or 2 in the morning when they were having problems and wanting to come in and get service. It was the same thing, dealing with a drug and alcohol, someone who's coming off drugs and alcohol and taking that phone call because they want to come into the facility to get help. They're suicidal, they're at the end of the rope. They're finally asking for help. Rock bottom is there. So I've been able to handle people in these situations. So I thought, what? I'm going to be able to handle them from an opposite standpoint because I've dealt with suicide in my life. Lost my dad to it, And even if, I've also had the feelings. I've also been there. It's gotten dark for me quite a few times in my life. By the grace of God, I never followed through with it, But for me, it's like every call I get, I want to be able to help that person. And if it's not me being able to talk them down or send someone for them to, a crisis worker over to take care of them and save them, I mean, even if it's just giving them resources. 24 hours a day, we have someone man on the phones. If you're having a crisis, if you feel you're having an anxiety attack, but you're not suicidal, if you just got in a fight with your significant other, your wife, your husband, and you need to just vent to someone, we're there for that too. We even reach out to the youth. We go out into the community through our outreach program. I've had the honor to go out and do that quite a few times, just to get out there and meet the people. And you'd be surprised by how many people come up to us and just thank us for being there. So kids even call through the Central Valley Suicide Prevention Hotline. I say kids because, I'm much older, but we're talking about, youth between the ages of 13, 17 that will call. We also have the text and chat, which is a really big venue for these kids to be able to reach out as well. When they can't talk to anyone or they feel like that they can't express their feelings to mom and dad, they can text us and they can respond. I enjoy doing that, but I'm still not down with the lingo. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard for me to pick up the abbreviations and sometimes the emojis, but I'm working on it, I'm working on it. But yeah, it's two different avenues. If you can't talk and you feel like you just want to text and vent to somebody, you can text us. If you feel you just want to call and vent, that's another thing. We're still going to assess you. We're still going to ask you those questions just to make sure you're safe. And I tell everybody that by law I have to ask these questions. Please don't take offense, but just a few quick questions and we can move on to your story. And then we just talk to them.
I think the reason why I joined the Army more so is that the recruiter approached me, and the major selling point was that, do you want a certain career after you get out of the military? And he offered a position. It was called a unit supply specialist, and I was really good with numbers, really good in math in school, and so I really saw that as like an opportunity for me to just further those skills. But then ultimately my goal was to work for either a defense contractor or something like that after I got out of the military, and so I'll be able to transfer those skills. In addition, there was an $8,000 signing bonus. So you tell a 16-year-old kid you can get $8,000, have a job that's going to be transferable after you get out, and I went for it. So I actually joined the California Army National Guard as my branch of service. So I was in the National Guard for a total of 8 years, and that 8-year commitment was basically 18 months of that was a deployment to Iraq. My unit actually got mobilized in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom 2. Initially, for the initial invasion, we got called up, and then we got stood down, and then the second time we actually got orders, and it was well, it's go time. And then they started allowing us to purchase more equipment and things like that. And because I was in the supply section, I saw this, this money being available for us to purchase equipment, and I was well, this is definitely serious. And so served my 18 months and then returned back and did my 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. When I talk about my military experience, I talk a lot about my deployment just because it was pretty much 18 months, but it felt like 2 years of my life. It felt like an eternity. And so my part-time service in the Guard, only thing I really remember about the part-time service before and after was really just doing a lot of training, getting ready and prepared just in case we were called back up again. But most of my experience, I spent a lot of time, downrange, or playing in the sandbox, and so it really had an impact on me. I would say it shaped the way I viewed myself. It shaped the way that I viewed the world around me, the way I think about people, relationships. One of the things that I think goes unnoticed is when you're down there, in the sandbox, we call it, you expect, family members, things like that, to send letters and to be connected with you, and that doesn't really happen that much. At least not for myself, not for a lot of the soldiers that I was there with. Believe it or not, it would be these random kids from like the middle of nowhere in Iowa or somewhere like that. They send you a care package, man, and like when you open it up and you have those Girl Scout cookies and the beef jerky and just the stamps, all the things that they would send, like that was the comfort that really helped get you through. But at the same time, there's like this realization, like, well, where's my family's letters? And you would still, I would still call my families. Luckily, I had a girlfriend at the time. She wrote me, and she would send like perfume. She would put her perfume in the envelope, and man, I would just sit there and just like hold on to the letter, like as if it was going to be my last time holding it. Because truthfully, you really never knew whether or not you were gonna be the next one. And I think, and I'll tell this story. I'm okay with telling this one. Is that there's times where if a soldier in your unit actually is killed in action, the whole unit has to go out on the tarmac and watch that casket be loaded up on the C-130. My first time having that experience, it was an eye opener. I think it was within a few months of us being in Iraq, and it was like one of those moments where it's like, all right, this is real. Like, this is really happening. And even though, they called Balad, Iraq, Mortar Alley, so we would get mortared every day. Like, that siren would constantly go off to the point where you just get numb to it, and it's like it becomes normal. But when something happens to someone that is within your unit, it hits home. Like, you hear about other soldiers dying in different parts of Iraq and things like that, but then when it happens in your unit, it really hits home. And then it happens once, and then it happens again, and then it's again, and then it's again, and that clock, and in your mind, you're trying to like block that out, but you're also trying to make sure that you're staying alert so you can stay alive, but you can also, help your fellow soldiers, because the decisions you make and the things you do, make a difference between someone living or dying. When they would bring their weapons into me, if I'm not making sure that weapon is mission capable, I would have to live with the guilt if that weapon doesn't fire properly, if I did something wrong, or if I forgot to put a piece back in. And so it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of tension, and I think in the moment, you just keep working, and you work through it, and we support each other. I think I can't understate that. As like, it was the support, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, luckily we had, electricity, and so we would play Halo, Madden, Call of Duty, like all these, that was our downtime. And so that really helped, is just having that sense of community. And that helped me in the sense that it taught me that even in the most dire situation, as long as you have human connection, then you could pretty much get through anything. Initially, it was very challenging to connect with those veterans in that program. And one day, and I was, I'm scheduling these meetings and having them, hey, come meet me in the office. They weren't coming, even though I was literally physically located there at the site. They would not meet me for our scheduled meetings. So I decided, I was like, you know what? Go sit out in the smoke pit. I went right back to Social Work 101. Meet the client where they're at. And I go out there to the smoke pit. All of a sudden, there'll be one veteran out there. Next thing you know, he's like, hey, you want to play dominoes? Start playing dominoes with him, engaging and connecting. I would go in the office for a meeting or something like that. Next thing you know, the veteran's knocking on the door. And he's like, hey, Mr. Brown, and just starts spilling it. Just starts telling me everything, whole story, life story. And then that care coordination and that assistance was able to flow. It was able to, with no judgment, nothing like that. And I think where that helped at is that the way the veteran community works is that when you do good by one, they're gonna go tell their friend. you know, you put yourself in that space and you really connect with people. But this position in suicide prevention came up, and I call this position my dream job. This position is my dream job because the goal of this job, this role in suicide prevention now, is to organize the veteran community to prevent veteran suicide. It's not necessarily a medical intervention, like, oh, well, you know, come to the hospital and we'll do X, Y, and Z. This strategy is saying, while you're healthy and there's not a crisis going on and you're a veteran in the community, what strategies can we employ within your community to make sure that you are connected, so that way that's before the suicidal crisis happens, right? While you know, you have a young male, 18 to 34 years old, kind of similar to me when I was at that age. Like, is there something in place to kind of guide you along the path until you get out of that 18 and 34-year-old range? Because that is a very challenging time for most people, and it's the time where we see one of the highest prevalences of suicide. And so just looking at this program is really about encouraging and empowering communities to kind of look at themselves and say, what infrastructure do we need to build within our community to make sure that veterans stay connected with each other? I had this meeting with my Female Veterans Coalition, and got these women together, and the excitement that was just emitting off of them, it felt good to be a part of it, because they're taking ownership and control, because they know what every other veteran knows that they're missing, which is camaraderie. They're missing camaraderie, and they're deciding that I'm not waiting for someone else to develop a space for me to commune with my battle sisters, is what they're calling themselves. We're gonna do it. And that's what it's gonna take. And so for me, I just love being a part of the process.
We're going to be having our keynote feature speaker coming up in a second, but instead of me trying to introduce him, we're going to show this short video to kind of do the introduction, and then we will get into our conversation.
In a world so populated with impossible, where people would tell you that you can't, what if? What if you take the chance to go after your dreams, to choose a path of impossible over easy? Sure, it's hard. Sure, it takes risks, and you may fail. But what if you didn't? What if you succeed and make a change in this world? Think of all the lives that you can help. In a world full of talk, what if you choose to forge your own truth through discipline? Discipline to face the impossible when so many say you can't. Life was never meant to be easy. Mistakes, failures, it will all happen to us. But what if you decide to get up after each fall, to build strength where you were once weak? What if in the span between birth and death that you choose to make a difference in this world by living with a code? In a world so popular with hate, what if? What if you choose to be something more?
If you guys can help me welcome Mr. Tulam, our distinguished keynote tonight. I want to thank Ruthie for helping us get you here today. Just a little background real quickly. I got to see a couple of interviews and things that Tu has done. If you've not, go Google him. You'll find a million interviews, videos. Follow him on Instagram. I do every morning. I've taken a lot of his stuff to heart, but I told my staff, I said, we got to get this guy do something on veterans, for veterans, either Veterans Day or September with Recovery Month and suicide prevention. And so we actually reached out through the Ronan Tactics website, plug right there, and said, let's see if we can get into contact. And it was kind of a roll of the dice. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. And we actually got an email back from Ruthie like, yeah, so what are you guys looking at? And we had mentioned some of the dates here in September, and they're like, well, you know what, we're booked out till October with a lot of stuff. And we're like, oh, all right. And then we got a follow-up email from Ruthie that said, let's set up a call. And they were like, you know what, run us through what you're trying to do again. And they said, we'll make it work. And I think on the call, it was a Zoom call, and it was my team and Ruthie. And when two actually came on, my staff were like, oh my God, he's going to fanboy out. And I did. I got a little fan. We're like, oh! But what I appreciate from two was just that he said, we'll make it work. And I said, he goes, don't worry about it. We'll make it work. We'll come out there. So thank you for, taking your time, making this work, and really reaching out for our community. And so we're going to have a conversation and really talk a little bit about your experiences, but also kind of the path you found to hope, to resilience, and to purpose, and things that we can hopefully share with folks today that they can take with them as well. So I don't know if you want to, I thought stools would be better that way.
Absolutely.
If it's kind of long, we can stand up if need be. My knees and back do require me to move every so often. So just to start out real quick, those of you guys that are not familiar with Two's story, we're going to kind of give a little bit of the level setting and background. And so if you can just share, and I'm sure you've done this before, but just the Two's origin story as far as your early childhood experiences and things that you kind of feel set you for the career path and the work you do today.
I want to prompt this with life, right? Life is about living in fulfillment. And the only way we're going to live in fulfillment is we live a life of purpose. But a lot of us have a hard time finding purpose. But purpose is, I feel, if any of us face struggle, hardships, and if we are able to really define the narrative, the teachings of those hardships, then there lies the answer, purpose. It took me many years to understand that, right? So a little bit about me. I was born in war. I was born in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. My mother shielded my body from incoming artillery fire in the morning of my birth. At this stage of the Vietnam War, American troops left Vietnam, and I was unfortunately born on the losing side. At 3 months old, I lost my freedoms, and we lived underneath communist oppression. My uncles that served alongside the Americans were immediately brought out to the re-education camps, and these were torture camps. Prisoners were forced into harsh manual labor. Anybody who fell sick or ill due to these harsh living conditions were immediately brought out to the jungles and quietly murdered. Like the battlefields of Afghanistan, people were dying, leaving any means possible. After the fall of South Vietnam, some escaped on government planes, and some walked out to neighboring countries. A lot of these jungles were full of landmines dropped by Americans, and yet they're going to walk their families out to neighboring countries. So desperate. For my family, we escaped by sea. We are later known in history as the boat people. There was an estimated 400,000 refugees died at sea. There we were, loaded up on the bottom deck of a wooden fishing boat. To escape Vietnam by sea, first we had to escape past the military guards that patrols the coast for fleeing refugees. Any refugees that were caught were immediately separated and brought out to the re-education camps. Next, we had to escape the pirates from surrounding countries of Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia. These criminals would forcefully stop the boats, knowing that the refugees were fleeing with everything they had on them. They would board the boats and kill the men, rape the women, and enslave the children. It was such a lucrative business that it brought in more pietry from surrounding countries. The typhoon strength, of a tropical storm in the South China Sea has claimed the lives of thousands of refugees. And somehow we navigated past all that. We made our way into Malaysia, where the Malaysian Coast Guard stopped us at gunpoint. At this point, they were not accepting any more refugees, so they forcefully roped our boat and pulled us back out to the South China Sea. And when there was no more sight of land or hope, they cut the line, shot the motor, and left us there to die. My mother said we drifted for nearly 30 days. A lack of food and water, the dead was thrown overboard. It was common practice, amongst fleeing refugees to carry poison within their belongings. And this poison was to be administered to the children once the journey ends for us, so that we may not die a painful death. And, my mother says the days turn into weeks, more people died of starvation, dehydration. And, she held on to the hope, one more day. And to one day, we just got caught up in a huge tropical storm. And this storm was so massive, she said that our boat should have capsized. And somehow the storm pushed us further out into the South China Sea. To eventually, we were saved by a passing Russian supply boat. Can you imagine that? A huge tropical storm washing us out to the safety of a rescue. By the grace of God. And then, we were saved only to endure 1.5 years in the Indonesian refugee camps, where thousands have died, starvation and sickness. And when my family finally made it to America, we were spit on, flicked off, and called by many racist names. Was told to go back home to our country. See, the thing was, we didn't have a country. My parents lost their freedoms, and everything they had to start over in a new country that didn't even accept us. So, eventually we settled in Fayetteville, North Carolina, right? So Fayetteville is a military town right outside of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Fort Bragg is the biggest Army base in all of America. It had a huge sign that read, Fort Bragg, home to the 82nd Airborne and Special Operation Forces. Purpose. And the universe guides us. There was a reason why I ended there. So when we first moved to Fayetteville, right outside the biggest military base, we lived in a very poor part of town. And we lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and the only furniture that we had in the apartment was one used full-size mattress that my whole family slept on. My brother and I would wear hand-me-down clothes from other refugees. My mother would stay up late at night fixing the holes in the clothes and shoes so that my brother and I can go to school. I tell you, going to school as a Vietnamese refugee was extremely difficult. I would get picked on and separated from my peers. See, the Vietnam War was not a popular war, and I was the face of this unpopular war. It was kind of racist times in America. You know, and I felt the hate from my peers and their parents, some of my teachers. Eventually, my parents got divorced, and my mother remarried. And this is when my whole life changed. We were immediately indoctrinated into a military upbringing. See, my stepfather was a military man, and he raised us with very strict military discipline. Dress code, room inspection, chores, no blue jeans except for Friday, no television except for weekends. Like very just regimented, you know? And I tell you, man, I really had a hard time with it all. You know, I didn't know at the time, but I was a traumatized child. You know, I was born in war, escaped genocide, left for dead, refugee camps, racism. So you can see how like a divorce and a strict military upbringing was really difficult for me. You know, and I was a weak, really weak, defeated child. But this all changed when I was 9. See, my mother came to my bedroom and she handed me a box, you know. It was a final departing gift from my father. Since my parents' divorce, I was allowed to speak to my dad. So this was just it. It was the last gift. And within the contents of this box, there were 4 VHS tapes. There were dubbed tapes written in Vietnamese, you know, so I couldn't read Vietnamese, so I randomly picked a tape and threw it in a VCR. It was The Art of Budo. The combat side of being samurai. Bushido, the way of the warrior. And the 7 virtues which governs the way. Compassion, duty, honor, respect, loyalty, justice, courage. The virtues of Bushido, you know. And you know what is really interesting is that it's amazing how ancient code of ethics of a warrior can literally shape a powerful purpose. And the pain that I felt as a child through suffering and oppression allowed me the strength I needed. So, you know, you fast forward that to when I was 16, I was training to go into the Special Forces. I was running through the woods of North Carolina with a backpack on because one day I was going to go free the oppressed. I didn't know if I was going to make it, but I was going to try for the Special Forces, you know. So 18, I joined the Army. Started with the 82nd Airborne. Then I went to the long-range amphibious reconnaissance teams, tried out for the Special Forces, and by 21, I was on the Special Forces A team. The Special Forces mission is to free the oppressed. They're masters at unconventional warfare. There are 9 primary missions: hostage rescue, direct action, reconnaissance, weapons of mass destruction and recovery. You know, back in '98, I was stationed out in Okinawa, Japan, and being a forward deployed Special Forces battalion, you are the crisis response force for the continent of Southeast Asia. And back in '98, the biggest threat to America in Southeast Asia was North Korea's No-Dong ballistic missiles. It's Crazy how things hasn't changed, right? So yeah, as a Green Beret, I travel around the world. I've been to 27 countries, cross-trained with different commando forces, living with the people, the natives, connecting with the land, freeing the oppressed. You know, during the war years, I tell you, you know, you come to realize just how far you're willing to go for your purpose. You know, a lot of people tell me that, you know, hey, this is my purpose in life. But let me ask you this, are you willing to die for it? Are you willing to die for your purpose, right? You know, during the Iraq War, so in 95, we captured Saddam and handed over to the Iraqi government. And this removal of power brought in a new reign of terror as Sarkawi and his army of Syrian foreign fighters. They set up sleeper cells in resistance to our military occupation. So we did a lot of low-vis reconnaissance back then, and intelligence with the CIA would lead us to these terrorist safe houses. And we would kill our enemies in a close quarters gunfight. And I tell you, in a close quarters gunfight, one or the other is going to die fighting for what they believe. You know, and that's when I came to realize just how far I was willing to go for the love of God and country. So the thing about purpose is this. It's very focus-driven purpose. You know, purpose backed by pain is powerful, but it's focus-driven. And at one point in my life, my focus became more on my addictions to painkillers. Drugs I used to numb myself from, you know, the emotions of war, loss of teammates. You know, know me so well that it made me into a drug addict. When I was in Iraq, I was injured by an IED, an improvised explosive device, roadside bomb. And for my injuries, they prescribed me painkillers. And I was immediately hooked. I felt in the euphoric of the drug that it just numbed me from life. In that stage of my life, I was at 12 years of war. So the thing about Oxycontin is it's a powerful drug. And it has a way of pulling you straight to the bottom. At the tail end of my career, I was fighting the wars in Africa. Boko Haram was a Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorist group that would fund poachers to come in and kill wildlife to fund their terrorist training camps. And then, along with that, they would enslave women and children into the human trafficking trade. You know, at that point in my life, I just saw the worst in the world. I was born in war, so I saw the worst of my childhood, and I fought back to try to free the oppressed in 27 countries. I saw the worst in the world. And war, you know, the thing about war is that the sight, sounds, the smell of war would be forever burned into every crevice of your soul. So after, 23 years, 27 countries, and 15 years of war, I retired. Decorated Special Forces Green Beret with no purpose. It was like life took the wind out of me, really. going at 150 miles an hour in life. You know, where do you go after you live life at that intensity? When you freed the oppressed, you know, you saw the sufferings of the world, where do you go? You know, for me, you know, I went to bed so tired. I barely had enough energy to do anything else. Laying in a dark room all day long became a thing for me. Back then, my wife would, she would work up in Denver, Colorado, as a manager in the corporate world, and she'll come home seeing that I haven't even moved since she left that morning. You know, at first I thought I was like tired, but I realized I was depressed. So that started my journey. Right, into healing. So how I started was, you know, I would sit around this dark room all day long, watching the TV that was off and just hearing the voices of the world played out over and over. And just sitting there and just feeling the emotion of shame, hate, regret, war, loss. Until one day, I heard an inner voice tell me to get up. So I did, and I walked around this dark house. In my home, I have a dedicated room I call my war room. It's 27 countries in that room, all my military stuff. Secret missions, assignments, antiques, artifacts, and within this room there were a collection of samurai philosophy books. One in particular was by Miyamoto Musashi, a Ronin, born in the late 1500s and died in 1645 after writing the Book of Five Rings and the 21 Principles of Dokudo. See, these ancient writings of a Ronin brought me back to the Bushido Code, a code that I found when I was at my weakest point when I was 9. It brought me back to the 7 virtues of Bushido: compassion, duty, honor, respect, justice, courage. Courage. You know, at that point, I just kind of mustered up all the courage I had in me, and I dumped all those pain meds down the toilet. And I suffered. And I tell you, that's not a good way to withdraw from OxyContin. I was at this point on 8 years of OxyContin. Courage. So I suffered for many months, vomiting, body aches. I felt like I was going to die. And literally I was. I was dying. I was dying to my old self. Because in life we must die. We must die throughout phases of our lives. What worked for us in our 20s may not work for us who we are today, so we must die to that, right? What worked for me as a commando to free the oppressed, and I had to encompass hate. Had to. So at a certain point in the war, okay, so if you put explosives on the door, you know you had to go through that door and you had to kill somebody at a close quarters gunfight. Fear cannot be present. So you fill that void with hate. And what happens when you hold on to that hate for a long time, it embodies you. You begin to hate yourself, the world. A beautiful, beautiful day next to the person that you love, you're in hell, internally. So I suffered, many months through that. And so I decided during that time frame of, detox, I decided, hey, why not get into meditation, So I got into meditation, mindfulness meditation. And let me explain what this does to your brain, okay? Because so there was a point that through the suffering, I was going to fight back. Same like a commando. I would study my enemy. I would look at the weak points, and I would come up with a course of action, and I would hit it with intelligence. Right? Same ingredient of war, but now it's me. I'm the enemy. Okay, so the first thing I had to do was I had to study how neuroscience works. So I started reading books about neuroscience. I started hearing doctors about neuroscience, right? How the thoughts are tied to emotions and how thoughts can trigger emotions and how we suppress or repress our emotions. I was that guy, so 5 o'clock in the morning, I run on the treadmill listening to some podcast with some doctor talking about neuroscience. Neuroscience. And then I started reaching out to spirituality, something I was lacking. Spirituality. God. So I started to practice some meditation and internal, breath, like just breathing into a rhythmic breathing and allowing breath to follow in to your emotions. You follow to your emotions and you let go of thought. And it took me many years to get that down. But I tell you, if you can let go of thought, then you don't have anything fueling that emotion, that fire, to let go of thought, to sit in a place of void. So I was practicing meditation, and it took many years to quiet down the noise. For me, I had a lot going on. So my practice would start at 4 a.m., and it's still ongoing. My thought process is, what does a perfect day look like to you? If you were to change yourself and who you want to be, if you were to reinvent yourself and die to that person that you don't want, that doesn't even serve you anymore, then what does that even look like? It starts with the day. It starts with your 24 hours. Your change is done within your 24 hours. Who you are to become, the answer is found within those 24 hours. So what does a perfect morning look like? Because you win the mornings, you win the day. And I came in with that game plan. So my day started at 4 a.m. and this is many practices from I meditated with Tibetan monks up in the Himalayas during my Special Forces career. I integrated with tribesmen, like the natives in Africa. I seen how people connected with God in their own culture, in their own religion. Multiply that around the world, 27 countries. So I started drawing different practices, right? So me hanging out with Tibetan monks, I was training with the Indian commandos up in the Himalayas and Jammu Kashmir. Mountain warfare training, and I would go visit the monks during the weekends, and I'll meditate with the monks. And what I learned was they would throw their bodies in that cold water, like ice cold water in the morning. 3 o'clock in the morning, they'll jump into this freezing pond, and they'll come back out and they'll meditate, and you could feel the energy, the vibration. You can literally feel it. You know, I was a non-believer in my life. I wasn't raised around God, or, you know, was a non-believer. But there's things I saw around the world as a Green Beret. I had to live with the people. And I felt the energy. So the monks, you know, they would jump in this cold water and then they'll come out and they'll meditate and they'll go into this rhythmic breathing and they'll reflect on, like, literally an hour, they'll reflect on death. What does it mean to die? So I was taking notes, you know, I was journaling down all these thoughts from past experience, you know, around the world, and I came up with my perfect morning. And it's still ongoing. So my perfect morning is I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'll let my dogs out, and then I'll have this freestanding cold plunge. It's 38-degree water, right? And just letting you know, every morning, I don't want to jump in that thing, right? So it's still like a mind thing from its resilience, because it's what I'm training on. All right, what is the perfect morning? And it starts with resilience. Okay? So I would usually say a prayer right before I jump into cold water, and I'll jump into cold water. And what I'm doing is I'm changing the chemistry in my brain. It hits my brainstem, and what I'm doing is I'm changing the chemistry in my brain. I'm instantly booting up my brain. Tony Robbins practiced this. It changes you. It boosts up your brain, okay? If you don't have a freestanding tub, cold water. Cold ice water for 1 minute. Make sure you turn around, hit the back of your brainstem, and then you hit your behind your eyeballs, where the brain connects to the eyes, right? You're booting up that brain, then you sit in, and then after that, you let your body warm yourself up, and you sit into a rhythmic breathing. And for me, now, I have trained my mind and body enough where I could sit in stillness for 2 hours in meditation. Okay, so what does meditation do? Okay, so a lot of people say, what does meditation do for you? Do you just follow breath? No, you're not following breath. Yes, you are. That's a practice, right? But what you're doing is look, guys, if you monitor like your thoughts throughout your day, you know we generate 65,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. The majority of it's negative thoughts. And that ties into how our brains were wired. 200,000 years of human evolution handed down to us. You're here because your ancestors had to survive. Right? And you care about what other people think about you, because back then when your ancestors are hunter-gatherers, they care if they get kicked out of the tribe. It's survival. Handed down to us now. Same brain. So can you imagine you don't have control over these thoughts? How that can trigger like mental health? And war on top of that, and or childhood traumas? All of us have traumas, every single one of us, but we don't know how to release it, right? And through my practice of meditation, I find that was my anchor. You have to have an anchor point throughout your day, an anchor. So my anchor is 4 o'clock in the morning, no matter how hard life gets, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to jump into cold water. I'm going to go into rhythmic breathing for usually an hour to 2 hours for me. But it didn't start like that. I started off with 2 minutes. Okay? Okay. And then I go into physical training, mind and body. You cannot tell me you're happy when you're having physical health issues. You have to respect the body because that's your vessel. Okay, so mind first, body. Okay, so, and then I practice spirituality these days. So I sit in the dark. So I live in Colorado, so high up in the mountains, right? High up in the mountains. I have these aspen trees, completely dark on my deck in the morning. It's beautiful. So beautiful. And I would sit with breath. Okay, so the survivor's mind is an ungrateful mind, okay? It's when I say that, it looks for all the negative. The primitive mind looks for all the negative. It had to. All these ancestors, it had to look for all the dangers, right? For us to survive. So in today's world, what is the dangers? He doesn't like me. Pay attention to him. He don't like you. All right? Pay attention to her. Right? So you're paying attention to all these negative. Hey, remember when you did this back when, I don't know, 16? Like, oh, yeah. Right? So all those thoughts are tied to what? An emotion. And if you have no control over your thoughts, think about all that emotion going through your body. So Dr. David Hawkins, he talks about level of consciousness, right? And anything below 200, you're killing yourself. What I'm saying this is fight or flight. When you're constantly living in anxieties and stress, you're activating that fight or flight. So your body immune system is not present enough to fight off disease. So that's why meditation is so important. You have to let go of thought, and you have to sit with emotion. And then if you're able to sit with emotion with no thought, then now you can go into my third practice, which is we went into breathing practice, right? So a lot of us, we breathe up our upper lungs, and we don't breathe into our lower abdominal. And if you suppress any emotion, which is we all do, we suppress emotions, all that energy, all that emotion, trauma is lowered into the lower abdominal region. Okay, so imagine my practice. If I'm able to let go of thought, I'm able to breathe into the lower abdominal region, I'm moving that energy that I suppressed, and I can release it. There's a lot of practices doing this, okay? So, and that's what I find I'm doing these days. So along with me learning how to heal myself, I decided to start my own company, or I decided to be an entrepreneur. So along with my wife, okay, so the Green Berets, you send in a 12-man Special Forces A team, and we'll train armies or force multipliers. Armies that can organize, cut off lines of communication, contain and isolate, and overthrow an existing country, and we have done it. So I figured, how hard would it be to train civilians? So that's kind of where it started. My wife and I would travel all around America, and I would teach law-abiding citizens so they can better protect themselves and their families. I was taking my pain, and I was turning it to purpose. During the war, we had to find, fix, and kill some of the world's most wanted men. I was a part of the Tier 1 Special Operations Unit. Just to let you know what that means is a Tier 1 Special Operations Unit is the national crisis. So anything that happened at the national level, we respond. When my wife and I were married, she had to endure a 3-day backpack, always packed, with a pager on me, because a pager was the most secure lines of communication that can alert me to deploy me anywhere around the world within a matter of a couple hours. Can you imagine that, living with that stress? And then the war was gone 10 months out of a year. 15 years. So what I'm saying is that when my wife and I first started a company, it's a blessing that I get to spend time with her now. And when I had to find, fix, and kill our enemies, I had to learn low-vis reconnaissance. So I had to learn how to use a digital camera and videography. I had to learn photography and videography. I would take pictures of a bad guy's house hovering on a helicopter miles away. I would drill holes on the side of a door to install pinhole cameras so I can get intelligence and atmospherics of an area of interest. Take a picture of a bad guy's face, crop it, compress it, encrypt it, and send it out through satellite comms. I used that same training when I first started my company to take a picture of my products, to crop it, compress it, and put it on my website. Pain and the purpose. It's very fulfilling, being able to build a brand with my wife. So a brand that I'm able to express who I am, my martial arts, my philosophy, my love for world culture. A brand that became the cover of Call of Duty. It's amazing. I want to share this with you because, my character Ronin made it to the cover of Call of Duty this February. And we've been filming with Infinity Ward. And they would scan in my face, my body, and they would capture my movements, my martial arts, my gunfighting. And when they were developing this character, they asked me about the Bushido Code and the teachings of 5 Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. It's crazy to think that an ancient code of ethics by the samurai came to me in my weakest point in my life at 9 years old. That gave me a direction through a code of compassion. And it led me around the world fighting for it. And when I lost my way, it was Bushido that led me back to the path of a warrior. Now I'm teaching the warrior code all around America. And now this same code is being shared in one of the most powerful, popular video game platforms in the world. And it allows me a platform to be able to speak value to our youth, help our veterans, and build communities across America. See, pain and the purpose. And that's the biggest thing that I find in the veteran space, the mental health space, is that we don't see the pain in it. Like, we don't see the purpose in our pain. God has given us like a journey, a path, and through that pain and struggle comes strength, purpose. So that's where I am, just living out my purpose. And that's kind of my journey.
Lisa, how are we doing on time? We're so good? Like 10 minutes? 20 minutes? What? Okay, well, that's a lot. Two covered a lot of stuff, in the story. And that's why when Lisa's like, well, do a conversation, I was like, why? I want to hear him talk. I don't want to hear me talk. Nothing new, but there's a couple of things that I really want to encourage you guys to do, and I'm going to ask too a couple other questions, but what I really want you guys to do is, if you get a chance, if you're on social media, use social media for good. Don't, like to say, get on there and worry about what other people are saying, but do things that are going to help, improve your life, that are going to help benefit you. Like I said, I follow Ronin Tactics on Instagram, because every day there's something in there. And I think, whereas Lisa and I even talked about once, I was just like, that's the most brilliant advice I've ever heard. So Tu had this one thing where he said, if you can't wake up at 4 a.m, because that's too hard, wake up at 5. And after you get that into a routine, wake up at 4:55. And then start working at 4:50, and you work your way to, and her and I talking, I was like, that is so brilliant. I'm going to start doing that because I can't get up in the morning, so let me do that. But one of the things, and I want to just share, and I have some questions, is like, again, using the social media. A couple of months back, I think right before the summer, I was having my body was not responding. And I was just like, I know I've damaged my body, but not to this extent. And so when I went to the doctor and just kind of scared, like, hey, everything's out of whack, they go, oh, dude, you got full-flown diabetes. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah. They go, this reader only caps out at 400. We think your blood sugar is like way above that. And they're like, you gotta make changes today. You gotta start doing these things or else you're gonna have to go on the insulin. You're gonna have to do all these things. And I have family history of it. I have young kids. And I came back and I think it was around that same time. And I was like, okay, well, I gotta cut out soda. And I think it was around those couple of days of that one where I saw one of your interviews where you talked about your uncle's talk about being a commando. And I said to myself, like, are you going to take action today? It's easy to say, like, well, eventually I'm going to do something. It was like, what are you going to do about this life or death situation today? And it was, I'm going to be a commando. And literally cold turkey. Haven't had a soda since. Haven't had a juice since. Haven't had a candy. The only sugar I have is like when they put, I know when I have sushi, they put their sugar in the soy sauce. I understand that I have it there. Like you're like, all right, I know there's carbs and stuff in the bread, but even those things, I've really just cut all those things down to where, the only reason I bring this up is last Friday I went back to my physician and said, it was a 3-month checkup, let's see how you're doing. And she was just like, how many of these pills are you taking? I was like, 2. And she goes like, let's move you to 1. I was like, okay. She goes through the labs and she's looking at I had done like labs a week before. She goes like, what are you doing right now? I go, what do you mean? She goes like, did you change your diet? I'm like, yeah, I cut all this stuff out and do this. And are you exercising? And I was kind of like, I got the summer we've gone on some family hikes, but I haven't fully gotten back into that. And she goes, I'm taking you off the meds. And why? She goes, your blood sugar, everything is like, she goes, if you do this, what you're doing now, lifestyle, she goes, there's no purpose for me to treat you for diabetes. You're still susceptible to it, and I kind of thought back, and I joke with my wife. I text her like, I'm cured. She goes, what do you mean? I'm like, yeah, the doctor took me off everything. I'm awesome.
Yes.
But it's containing that discipline and that lifestyle. But it literally was like a day or two after that diagnosis, I heard that one of like, are you gonna be a commando? And I was just like, I took it more of like, you can postpone decisions, or are you gonna take action today to do something to better yourself? And so. The result of that, 3 months later, they were like, the doctor said, there's no point in me giving you medication when you don't need it. It's going to do more harm at this point on your liver and kidneys and stuff like that, so do it. So if you're going to be on social media, follow stuff that's going to benefit you and do good. Learn how to wake up earlier and how to do those. But one of the questions I wanted to come to, too, because you talked about it a little bit, and even talked about, we know how trauma, we know how resentment, hate, those kind of things manifest itself physically. There's the research, the book I always cite, the body keeps score. The body keeps, that's generational. That's not just one. That can be that. So a way that we can alleviate that is letting go. And so if you want to touch or maybe share a little bit more about when did you come to that point of like release, like I'm gonna let this go. Like it's not mine anymore.
Wow, that's
and
so
it's some of the
powerful.
practices.
That's so powerful, guys, like letting go. Like seriously, like how do you even let go? My journey of letting go was like 9 years. 9 years. Okay, so letting go. First, we all have like some kind of trauma that we remember, right? And then we also have trauma that we don't. Okay, so why does this matter? So 0 to 7 years old, your subconscious is programmed. You're unconsciously forming a narrative of the world and who you are. Imagine you growing up around abusive parents or grew up around substance abuse. Think about where the world was at. Like our parents grew up from the generation of the Great Depression. Trauma, like my parents, war. My mother was born in war herself, the Indochina War. So imagine all this trauma handed down to you subconsciously. You don't even remember it. And then you remember what you do remember, right? So if you grew up in an abusive parent home or some kind of trauma event, you remember that. So different layers of trauma. So, I had to heal that. right? So at first I had to heal the war years because that was fresh. And I did through forgiveness. Forgiveness. I forgave the world on how they treated me because I didn't want to carry that anymore. Okay? And I did what I did to fight for the oppressed because of my traumas. And also me trying to live up to the man I wanted to be that I wasn't. When I was 9 years old, I wasn't brave. I was scared. I wasn't strong. I was weak. So I looked at the highest mountain, the hardest path. And the Bushido Code led me to that path, warrior. So, the first thing I had to do was I had to forgive, and that took a long process. Because consciously we can say we forgive. I forgive. No, you don't, because it's buried into your subconscious. So there's a way that our subconscious was programmed and a way our conscious was programmed. When we went to school, that's how we program our conscious mind, right? We learn. But how do you learn subconsciously? 0 to 7 years old, we subconsciously program our subconscious, right? So how do you program your subconscious mind now? So remember what I talked about, like the survivor mind that looks at the negative in life? So imagine you have all these negative thoughts playing out over and over. So subconsciously, you can't control it. Your subconscious mind fires and wires like your beating of your heart. Pushes oxygen to your muscles. You have no control. So imagine trauma at a young age or trauma that you suppress. You're still feeling it. Your subconscious survival mind is still thinking it because it's survival. You just don't know how to stop it. So I had to stop it. I had to stop it. So I stopped it by, you could practice this today, right? So let's just say you have something that is really negative that happened to you. It could be recent or it could be something that you're facing throughout your life. Write it down. Write it down just the way it is. Don't put a narrative on it. Write it down exactly what happened. And then read it. And then write 1, 2, 3, and write a narrative. The why that must happen. Why did that must happen for you to be the greater version of yourself? You see what I'm doing? I'm rewriting the narrative. Consciously, I'm rewriting the narrative. So how do I program my mind subconsciously? So I started studying like deep meditation, breathing practices. We have like, Zoom calls with, other Spec Ops guys that practice like SEALs and Green Berets that we sit and we practice these forms of breathing and releasing. We're letting go. Okay? So the first thing you have to let go is your thoughts. So you have to stop that negative loop back. Right? The negative loop back. So how do I interrupt it? I interrupt it by a new narrative. Now I have to embody that narrative. And so I started studying like hypnosis and stuff like that. So what I found was hypnosis works. And you can do that on yourself. You don't need somebody hypnotizing you, right? So how I do it is to rewrite the negative narrative, I started practicing positive affirmations. You can download an app, right? And what you're doing is when you're sleeping, your brain goes into delta brainwaves. Okay? When you're daydreaming, it goes into theta brainwaves. Okay? Those are the two access to the subconscious.
Delta going into REM?
Yes.
I go to my subconscious and I'm slipping back into my memories. If I get into a REM, I don't know how to get there.
because you haven't separated thought. You have to separate thought, right? And you go into a rhythmic breathing sequence, and it puts you into, if you're meditating, it puts you into a daydream state. You're still present. You're just daydream state. You'll feel it. So those are the access to the subconscious. So imagine if you hear a positive affirmation, I am happy. I am grateful. Right? All that's playing out over and over into your subconscious. So as you're sleeping, what is it doing? It's reprogramming your subconscious. So in time, what you're going to start feeling is more positive. It works. Right? And it took, like I said, it took me many years. So letting go. Also, your body holds on to trauma. Literally, it stores within your muscles. So deep breathing practice has released traumas that were stored in my muscles, in my tissues. All of us have it. Any time we suppress trauma, it's there. Okay, so you just if you go throughout your day and just be aware of your thoughts, you'll realize that it's majority negative. And you're hardly ever present. You're always in the future or you're in the past. You're never really here. And the power is right here. Because you can change your past in the present moment. Because you can go back to the traumas of a childhood. If you focus, you can go back to that childhood and you can heal that portion of your life. And it was a lot of practice, right? So letting go was that. It was rewriting the narrative, going to a very deep breathing practice. I'm talking about practice that you see natives used. That's disconnected to our Western medical practice of shoving pills down our throat, which is suppressing emotions. You're not releasing it, you're suppressing it. So you're making it worse, right? So by understanding how to let go is a powerful thing. And everybody, I feel, has their own journey in letting go. What worked for me may not work for you. And everybody has their journey. Everybody has their journey. But the thing is, you have to start with a rewriting of the narrative. And that's done in the present moment.
There it goes. I think we have about 5 minutes left, so and then we're going to bring up our earlier storytellers and actually have a panel, and you guys will be able to interact with our storytellers. So if you didn't get a chance or you have a question, we'll have those cue cards around. So if you want, put those in there. It just becomes easier for us to utilize those for Q&A, and Jerry will come up in a second and do some of those. We'll be facilitating, moderating that next part. One of the things I think that's really important, and I'm glad you went into things about deep breathing and mindfulness and really helping folks understand that. There's Aaron. So my team and I, in a previous county, in a previous iteration, I actually got trained in this mindfulness curriculum for schools. And so it was a curriculum just basically teaching people how to practice mindfulness. So as a result, we had to do it ourselves. And I think the most I was able to get to was like 2 minutes or something before like my mind would go squirrel, and then it's back again starting. But some of the things that we did were so basic and practical that Erin did was, so she did it with, I think, were they first graders? Yeah. So she would spend an entire Friday every week going from classroom to classroom with first graders. First graders are difficult to do some mindfulness practices with because they're squirrely and they're hard to kind of get under control. So some of the practice she did was as simple as starting them off with just stillness. Nobody touch anybody else for 30 seconds, right? Because they're trying to poke and pinch, and it's like nobody touch anyone else, and you kind of build from there. So I'm not saying that you guys are first graders, but I think there's some really basic practices that we can do with mindfulness and move up, and I really appreciate the fact that Tu highlighted that, because my thing was like sometimes if you talk to audiences about mindfulness and meditation, they kind of look at you like, man, that's some hippie stuff. I'm not doing that. Okay, fair enough. But I think today, you heard him not only cite medical support for that, but I would say that 2 is probably the furthest thing from what you would say is like, that guy's a hippie. He doesn't know what he's talking about. You've used the adage, a warrior in a garden. Better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So if he's giving you some of these tips, hopefully you guys will kind of take it and utilize it for yourselves personally. It's not me. It's not a therapist. It's someone who has that lived experience that has found a path. And like you said, the path may work for him. It may work for you. It may not. But be open. And that's what I'm hoping with our storytellers. You guys will be able to hear. Be open to finding what works for you, to help let go, to build on that resilience, to build hope. And not only for yourselves, but figure out how you can empower and support other people, and especially our veteran community and also our next generation of folks that are going to be going into the service. Because we know there's a lot of stigma around mental health generally in our community. And people, I think, go into it of like, well, I'm going to go into this and I'm not going to ask for help. Like, there's a time and place for you to ask help. And one of the best ways I think we do it is empower our young people with skills and tools that they can use themselves, that they can go ahead and manage and do some of those things. So And what we did in that, not that we have 2 up here, I don't want to focus on what we did in the past, but the whole thing with it was we went in and did it once a week and left it to the teachers and the students now to develop that skill and do it for themselves. And so teachers would tell the kids sometimes when they would start getting anxious, like, hey, go into your turtle position. And they would hug themselves and they would just rock. And they would self-soothe. Things like that, as Stu shared, the science helps in there. So if you haven't done it, there's mindfulness apps, there's all kinds of tools, there's all kinds of things you can find in there. But do what works for you. I know for our team, we've done it in the past, and I think, again, I watch all your videos. So one of the things that I've started doing has been, just kind of sitting alone. So it's not that I don't want to interact with my family, but sometimes I just need to sit. No music, no TV, just sit alone. Now, I don't do necessarily always the deep breathing, but it's just alone with your own thoughts for a little bit and just kind of help you cure. So again, social media, if you're on there, go actually use it for good, follow the good things. But I'm going to call up wherever Jerry went. There he is. Jerry Silva is going to come up, and we're going to get our next panel set up. And you guys, if you get a chance, write out some questions if you got those. Thank you very much, sir.
Absolutely.
You guys give him a hand if you can.
Thank you.
We're going to set the panel up, though. You'll be able to ask them some questions. And we'll also have our distinguished guests all available afterwards for you to be able to interact with them as well.
I got it, Mike. I'm ready to go. I'm all mic'd up. Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name's Jerry Silva. As Ahmad mentioned, I am the Suicide Prevention Program Manager at the Fresno VA. I've been really lucky to serve in that role now for almost 12 years. Our team is growing. I've been very blessed by having Mr. Brown on my team. He's doing an awful lot of great things in the community, really doing a lot of connecting and engaging, and that's really what the call is about. It's events like this that are very special. You can just feel that energy. Our team is privileged every year to partner up with Fresno DBH, Clovis Veterans Memorial District, and other stakeholders that kind of come along and just gather and just generate all of this momentum and energy for special events like suicide prevention awareness. One of the cool parts every year in these events is for us to gather our participants and to get into some question and answers. So just by a show of hands, so far, has everybody enjoyed this evening's get-together? Yeah. How about a hand for our gentleman up here, too? Outstanding. Outstanding. What the aim will be in this next portion is to go a little bit deeper, to go next level, and these brave men already have disclosed an awful lot of deep personal stories about themselves. For gentlemen to stand up here, risk being vulnerable, be transparent and above board with their own struggles, to me really shows what dedication and being a true man is. How many would agree with that? Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking forward to this next portion. We and the team have put together some questions that hopefully will aim at getting a little bit deeper and a little bit more personal. And if by chance some follow-up questions follow, we'll get into those as well. So without further ado, let's have the gentleman come on up and we'll have a seat and we'll get started. Gentlemen, come on up. Hey guys, there they are. All right, let's get started. Okay, we'll get started. And first of all, I have a question for the panel, and I'm going to start with a general question. So let's start off first. For a lot of people, stigma around issues such as depression, trauma, mental health makes people hesitant to seek help. What's your suggestion to people who are worried about the stigma or what others may think about them reaching out and getting help and support? Pete, let's start with you for that one.
Well, there is a stigma, particularly with veterans reaching out. A lot of situations happen when someone deals with a veteran. The first thing they think of, they hear there's a veteran, the first thing they think of, am I going to have problems with him? And being a veteran in recovery myself and having to deal with a lot of the issues that I've dealt with in recovery, having to get past that stigma myself and accepting that I deserved the help and that it was okay to ask for the help helped me to kind of look past that stigma. So if I can give any personal advice to anyone who's dealing with it now, forget about the stigma. You deserve the help. Go and get the help. It's only a stigma here in your mind. Even though you think you see it on TV, you think you see it online, yeah, it may be there. But the worst part of it's up here. And if you can look past that and, look at yourself as someone who deserves your help, that's what you need to do. And if you're able to do that, you can look past that stigma and help yourself. And once you're able to do that, you're able to help others.
Excellent. Thank you, Pete. Appreciate that. And Derrick, same question. How would you address that?
I mean, I'm just going to echo everything that, everyone up here on the panel is talking about, the mind. I mean, it really is a battle in your mind. And what the other part, though, is it's a battle in society as well. There's this idea that, especially as a male, as a veteran, all these different titles that we might have, that we can't share how we feel. And once you understand that, feelings are normal, just a normal part of our human existence, and the ability to express those feelings actually gives you power and control over them. There's a saying that I have is, fear is false evidence appearing real. You're either going to F it and recover, or face it, or F it and run, or face it and recover. And so we can really tap into that warrior ethos and kind of go towards that thing that we're afraid of. One of the things that, to me, I think to get past the stigma, I really like the idea of being able to reach out to a 988 number and just talk to somebody on that other end. Today I was at the stand down and there was this soldier, 27-year-old male, airborne, air assault, all these things. And he said, I just lost my way and I don't have a purpose. And like the gentleman earlier, spoke about just being able to find that purpose in that pain. But as another male and a veteran, just having that space to just listen. It's not always about coming up with the solutions. And as I sat there and just allowed that space, he actually came up with the answer on his own by me just creating that space for him. So, to get past the stigma, we just need to create space for people.
Awesome. And I will add, I'm very, very blessed and fortunate to be Derrick's supervisor at work. And if ever there's an example of connection and engagement walking, it's Derrick. I'm really, really lucky to be his coworker. That's outstanding. Two, I'm just going to reiterate the question that we're starting out with tonight's panel. For a lot of people, stigma around issues such as depression, trauma, mental health makes people hesitant to seek help. What's your suggestion to people who are worried about the stigma or what others may think about them reaching out and getting help and support?
You know, I used to care what other people think. Being on the A teams, you had to, as survival. You had to trust your teammate to collapse that sector when you're going into that room in a close quarter. So I cared what other people think, survival. And why I keep on hitting on this is because you care what other people think, right? You shouldn't. Okay, and it's so like freeing to let that go. So the thing was, there was a certain point of my suffering that, you know, I had to let go of caring what other people think. And that's part of healing. And, you know, it takes courage. Remember when I talked about the Bushido Code and courage was why I dumped the payment? It takes courage to not care what other people think. Okay? So when I started healing myself, I had to step away from the noise and opinions. Okay? And I had to sit with it. The shadow. You know, we all have a shadow, you know. The thing is, we don't make friends with our shadow. You know, we try to suppress our shadow, and you're not going to win. See, the shadow is our traumas. It's our beliefs that holds us back in life. It's our addictions, right? And sometimes that shadow comes and sits. You have to understand why things were the way it is. So I had to understand why I had to face oppression. At that level, I had to see people put on their knees and their lives taken at a young age, as a child. I had to see that. Because the force that fought back against it was that. It was me taking that trauma and that pain and fueling it into purpose. So when you heal yourself, you have to look at it like that, right? You have to step away from all the noise. You have to step away from that, and you have to have courage to look within and sit with it. You know? And that's what I was talking about, is like you have to die to it. So die to caring what other people think. Die to all your addictions and all your bad negative thoughts that doesn't serve you, because it doesn't serve you. All right? And we're not awakened to it. And I think, like, I could speak for me, is that unless I face that trauma and that pain and that suffering, there would have never been change. If you seek a life of comfort and safety, you'll never be anything more. There's not motivating you to be anything more. There's no pain behind the change. And I feel like a lot of veterans, and also a lot of people in society that are suffering. It's not just our veterans, it's everybody suffering. They turn to feeling the void. They feed the void. The void can't be filled. They fill it with addictions, alcohol, drugs, all the momentary addictions that don't even serve us, right? We fill that void with that because it stops that pain for just a little bit. But the pain is still there. And that's the thing, is if you don't have that pain, you'll never awaken to that. You'll never change. So, F what everybody thinks. Look out for yourself. Heal yourself. And project this kindness to the world. because that's purpose. People always ask me too, how do I find purpose? First, purpose is found through pain, because that's the only thing that can guide purpose, pain. When I look at a child in the Philippines or in Cameroon, Africa, or in the Middle East, and these children have lost their parents, put down on their knees, enslaved, and you became this force to free them, that came from my pain. But that pain had a lot of wounds, right? Because when you walk life, you run at that speed in life, it comes with wounds, right? You guys are here, and who you are, it comes with wounds. It's up to us on how to heal ourselves, and that can only be healed by first feeling pain. Through pain comes rebirth, and the dying of who you were, and the rebirth of who you need to be in this lifetime. We all have a purpose. Everybody's put in this world for a purpose, and that's for our soul to express its highest divine expression. And we can only do that if we heal our sufferings and heal our traumas.
Thank you, too. Appreciate that. Next one is for Pete.
I'm not following that.
Question for Pete. Is the veteran option still available with 988?
Yes.
And if so, how do we access that? Also, is there a difference between the regular 988 line and the veterans line?
Well, as far as I know, you dial 988, and it's going to give you an option to dial 1 for veterans or not. That's as of today is still the option. However, we do get a lot of calls from veterans who do not want to press 1. They'd rather talk to us. And my rationale from talking with the many veterans that I've worked with that would rather talk to the civilian line is that there's a fear that if they share these emotions and things that they're going to share with me on the phone, if they're going to say that they're suicidal, if they're going to, admit that they're in the moment, that they're having a suicidal crisis at this moment, that if the VA finds out about it, they're going to end up hospitalized. And for me, and my standpoint, from what I do in my job, is the last thing I want to do is hospitalize someone. I would much rather calm someone down. I'd much rather talk someone down, love someone through it. I don't want to send an ambulance and a fire truck and 4 units of the sheriff's department to your house during the worst possible time in your life. I'd rather sit there with you. I'd rather hear your life story than find out you died the next morning. And I feel that by doing that with these veterans, I'll sit and listen to them as long as I need to and hope them find some type of, conclusion to it. But most of all, resources and help after that.
I think it's great for anybody who's not really familiar with 988 Crisis Line. It's been around for 16 years. Began in 2007. We have 3 national call centers: New York, Georgia, and Kansas. There is a chance to respond to these crisis callers at all levels that Pete just talked about. One of the cool things for our team is we come alongside the next day, we contact the veterans, and we're able to offer help at any level. Sometimes it involves police for safety. And at this point, within the last year, the calls into the crisis line has rocketed about 50 to 75% increase. I've got about 7 or 8 staff on my team. It used to have 1 individual responsible for these calls. Now all of us on a daily basis have to stop our work and return these calls because of the need out there for these veterans and individuals in general making use of 988 line. And just what shows to me is just a tremendous amount of need and help that's out there. And it's not going to happen by just us guys. We know that already. We need to partner with everybody. So thanks for sharing that, Pete. Question for the panel. How do you guys think your own past experiences, maybe trauma, things that happened in maybe your childhood, played a role in your service career? Two, you did a great job describing that earlier, but I'm going to start over here with Mr. Brown. What do you say, sir?
Well, you know, again, two is doing a really good job of just laying it out. And, you know, I'm the seed of two enemies is what I tell everyone. My mom and dad were both Crips in Los Angeles. And so I grew up in that environment, which is, you know, very different than the environment that maybe two grew up in. But at the same time, on a physiological level, trauma looks the same. And so growing up, living in, you know, foster care my whole life with my grandmother most of that time, there was a Encyclopedia Britannica in the house, and I was constantly getting in trouble in school and couldn't realize, like, why was I continuing to get in trouble? Why was I continuing to get suspended from school? And one day while I was on restriction, I grabbed the Encyclopedia Britannicas with the presidents, because I was trying to decide, how do I become a good man? And I noticed something out of the majority of the presidents, starting with George Washington, they all served in the military. So I made up my mind in that moment. I said, if I'm going to survive, I need to join the military. So I volunteered to actually go to a boot camp called Angel Gate Academy that was in San Luis Obispo. And at that boot camp, I met several service members at the time who helped guide me and let me know the process of how to join the military. So from the 8th grade, I already knew exactly what I wanted to do. I made my decision, and you know, more or less, it was, you know, when you talk about core values and beliefs, I figured that if I joined the military, that it would help me reinforce those values that I know my grandmother really tried so hard to instill in me. But at the time, I was just so hard-headed, and I needed the structure and the discipline of the military if I was going to survive. I was not going to survive in South Central LA if I would have stayed right where I was at and did not join the military. So I made a very conscious decision to go towards pain, not realizing at the time that, you know, all the experiences that I would have, the struggles and all that. But I think the great thing about it is that when you rise above that, when you come out on top, it makes you you are empowered after those experiences. And so, you know, for me, again, those earlier experiences really just pushed me out of my comfort zone very early on. So that's what I would say.
Excellent. Thank you, Derrick. See a theme here? Pain, purpose. I kind of see it flowing. Outstanding. Same question, Pete.
Yeah, sorry. I grew up in a small desert town, like we said on the video, Barstow. My dad spent a lot of time in and out of jail growing up. My mother passed away when I was 13. Lots of drugs in my house, lots of meth, lots of bikers partying going on. I did everything to crave some type of structure coming up, but I found that, you know, that if I started partying, I didn't really think of those things anymore, you know. So I started off with alcohol problems early in my life. So when I joined the Navy, it was to get some type of structure out of my life. It was to bring some order into the chaos. And that was really what I really wanted out of it. But yet I still had those unresolved childhood issues that I didn't take care of. And when I came up, we didn't have bipolar disorder, we didn't have ADD, we didn't have these things that we have now. And we didn't have chemical imbalances. Counseling was a thing that was looked down upon. So all these things growing up that I could have been given access to and help with, they weren't provided for me. So I was pretty much left on my own. And I thought because my dad was a Marine and it appeared to help with him at some time in his life, that maybe it would be the shoe-in for me to get me out of my hometown and help me in that aspect. But it wouldn't be further on, and after dealing with a lot of drug and alcohol issues myself with pills and booze, I love Xanax. When the VA gave me my first prescription for benzodiazepines, it was like every feeling, bad feeling that I ever had in my life went away. And when I mixed that with those painkillers they gave to me, that was even just a sense of euphoria that I could never imagine, and I lived in it every day. You know, so I look back on it, it just seems like so long ago, but even now, today, it's still, I have to work at it every day. You know, the solution for me, if left to my own devices, is you know, behind the, or bellying up to the bar and, you know, and going in a prescription filled. So I know that I need to keep up with my daily maintenance every day, you know. But I did learn that from growing up the way I did, and I just never want to go back. So.
Thank you, Pete. Too, I know you've done a lot this evening describing childhood and the impact it's had on you. What specifically stands out that you could share with us that would speak to all of this?
You know, a lot of people ask me, like, you know, too, you're a world traveler, and you see life at a different angle, which I have. And you know, I climbed the highest mountains in the Himalayas and meditated with monks, and I ran with the Zulu tribes in South Africa, seen the world, connected with the people. And you know, one of the biggest questions since the beginning of life, human's consciousness, right? So since the creation of man, there was a certain point in our evolution that we raised a certain level of consciousness, that we became aware that one day we would die, that there's a higher being, a belief, right? Consciousness. So the biggest question, you know, that I get asked is, what's the meaning of life? What's it all about? You know, for me, you ask me as a human being, meaning of life transcends past thought. Thought is a man-made belief. Let go of thought, you sit with the heart. You just focus in on the heart. When you work on yourself, you focus in on that. You let go of thought. That is life. It's to feel. It's to feel. Transcends past thought. It's to feel and to live. So when you pick your purpose in this lifetime, you focus in on that heart. And you give that to the world. Right? Because that's a higher level of consciousness than hate. To come out of hate and to choose love, man, that's powerful. It's powerful. So, that is what I leave to you. The meaning of life is, it's past thought. To focus in our heart and project that to the world.
Thank you, too. Appreciate that. And Mr. Brown, you are a veteran helping veterans. But what if you can't find a veteran therapist who can help or has that experience as working with veterans? What would you suggest?
That's a really good question. You hear that often. You know, they don't understand me. Well, if you've been listening long enough here, human suffering is human suffering. And so when you make a statement like they don't understand me, you already shut off the opportunity for there to be built a rapport and a connection to happen. In my life, in foster care, every social worker that I've had was not African American. And yet, every one of those social workers and helpers has made a profound impact on my life. And so it's given me a view of the world and an ability to be open. And so I would say, challenge that thought of they don't understand me. In the veteran community, you hear that so often. They won't understand me. How do you know what they will understand if you don't give them the opportunity to understand? And sometimes that person sitting in that office, 2 weeks ago, I was actually talking to a group of psychology interns. None of them served, but all of them were children of veterans. Do you think they don't understand your suffering? Of course they understand your suffering. They probably lived in a home experiencing vicarious trauma because of the trauma that was being brought in the home by most likely their father. And so before you, as a veteran, are so quick to say they don't understand, teach them. Be open to teach. And I think if we have that mindset, then we'll be training up the next generation of helpers and therapists to help other individuals. But if we go around and say that they can't understand me, then how are we training up the next generation?
Excellent. Thank you, Derrick. And I do want to add that when you're searching out a therapist, what you're looking for is a great connection. And the skill sets that many of these licensed clinicians are at now in their professional careers are amazing. My team of licensed clinicians have so many years of experience. They've been serving for so long. Many of them come from veteran families. So when they share cases with me about how they're working with their veterans, I'm thinking to myself, wow, do you guys have any extra openings? I would love to be on the receiving end of those services. They're excellent at what they do. And by and large, they're not veterans themselves, but they have come from veteran families. They do an excellent job. We have some writing questions, and I think I knew what this one's for. What advice do you have for teenagers today, ones that may play the call of duty faithfully to bring them to reality and surviving in their life? K-Tune, you're on.
Make sure you record this.
Yeah, let's get
I want to hear this. Well, in order to survive a war zone, you're going to have high-powered rifle, swords. Oh, so what was the question? What was the question?
What advice do you have for teenagers today, ones that play the call of duty faithfully to bring them to reality and surviving in their real life?
Okay.
Gamers, yep.
The biggest, so I have a lot of young adults come to me. They're seeking the ingredient to success, right? Any young adult, if you're thinking like that, or you should be, you should look at a person who's made it and say, hey, what is that secret ingredient that you have? So I'm going to share my secret ingredient with you guys today. Resilience. Resilience. The ninja, right? I'm going to go off different path here. The ninja means to endure. The shinobi uses the word agent, so the ninja, the art of unconventional warfare. So what I say to you is resilience, to endure, right? So you have to be able to do that as a young adult. And you have to look at the bigger picture, okay? So if you walk aimlessly through life, then you will aimlessly walk through life, living and dying with no purpose. But as a young adult, if you fix your sights on something that's more powerful than who you are, purpose, that you're willing to die for, man, that's powerful. Can you imagine? You're willing to die for this. That's powerful. You're willing to die to be a better husband. You're willing to die to be a better father. You're willing to die to be a better human being, right? So that's powerful. It transcends past just war. So as a young adult, you had to have that resilience, purpose. And your 24-hour day. So a lot of like young adults, they're really lazy. Okay? And you know, they ask me, okay, so why make a bed too? I don't need to make a bed. And you know what? You don't. And the thing is this, and this is the whole thing about it all in the military. In the military, you're gonna have to make your bed, right? So you have to do it, and you're gonna have to do it right to military standard. But when I got out, it started with making my bed again when I was lost. It's not about making the bed. What is your standard? What is your standard? What's your standard in life? Right? And that comes with a purpose too. So the thing is, if you don't have a purpose and you don't have a standard and you don't have a resilience, those are the weapons that you need to be successful in life. All right, so as a veteran and a successful entrepreneur, that's my advice to the young adults. Resilience.
Great. Thank you, Chair. I know we just have a few minutes left. We want to get these last few questions in. Did you see a therapist along your journey? If so, what led you there? If not, could you explain what kept you away from therapy? Pete?
I did see his therapist. Took me some time to find one I trusted. I mean, it was a process. But I did, and I was really able to open up to someone and trust someone. And I was able to go back and deal with those unresolved issues that I needed to deal with. Still, there's still a lot of stuff in that bag, but I'm still in therapy now. I don't think I could do my job if I wasn't. It's like I said, it's one of that daily maintenance plan I work on every day with myself. It's therapy's part of it, and seeing a doc's part of it. So yeah, I'm still part of the therapeutic process.
When I hear of a helper who gets help, that really increases that credibility in that individual. So I'm really glad to hear that. We have a saying in our team. There's a saying that when you're in relationships with others, that hurt people hurt people. There's also a saying that says, changed people change people. Derrick, last one's for you, my man. Do you have to be a veteran to help?
Absolutely not. You have to, and you're speaking specifically to help veterans, right? So veterans, as a veteran, and I've done this to people, to test them, I'm going to look in your eyes, and they say the eyes are the windows of the soul. And I can look a person in their eyes and see fear. I've been able to do that since I was a child. My stepdad would walk in the room, and I would always know, like, okay, he's on something. He might be off a little bit. And so when veterans look at you, what do they see? What do they see when they look in your eyes? Are you afraid? There's a thing that we learned as a clinician is a process recording. So when someone says something to you, what are you thinking in that moment when they just said something? And a lot of times, veterans will intentionally tell you something for shock value, right? I heard this, the laughs. They'll tell you something with shock value, and it's dark humor. It's really dark. And the way you respond to that, they're gonna make their decision whether or not they wanna work with you or not. So, if you're going through an internship process or something like that, what I would recommend you do, and this is something that, even as a veteran that I had to do, I went and worked at US Vets, which is a grant per diem program in Los Angeles. And I heard some of the most horrendous stories from these veterans before I was licensed. But it was being able to just hear those stories of suffering and not flinch that has allowed me now to come to the place where I'm at today, where I walked into an emergency room at one point in my VA career where a veteran had meth-induced psychosis, and I didn't flinch. It's because I had been practicing it over time. And so I think anyone who first of all cares and are willing to put themselves in a position of vulnerability and be willing to die and put themselves at risk, that veteran will trust you. Because when I went in there and I sat in that room, I put myself in a position of vulnerability and I could have been harmed. And many times, I put myself in those positions every single day. Obviously, I'm an African-American male, I live in the Central Valley. I drove to Mariposa County, where there's probably 1% African-American up there. And I was able to develop a coalition in that community. Why? Because I was led by love. When you're led by those principles, and you push yourself past that fear, and you go into spaces where maybe you're not supposed to be, people will trust you. And so each one of us have to look within ourselves and determine if this really who we want to work with. We can always say that's someone else's job. But you know what? When that veteran is right in front of you, guess whose job it is? It's yours. And so if we take on that responsibility to say it's our job, then we will build that connection and rapport.
Awesome. Thank you, Derrick. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we're going to wrap it up. But before we do so, I'm going to go around to each gentleman here for one last takeaway this evening. We gather in these kinds of events. They're very special times. We also want to make sure we take away something very special. Whether we're veterans, we have veterans' families, we have loved ones out there, we're always about promoting suicide prevention awareness. If you were to take just the last few seconds, I'm going to start with you, Derrick. What is the one most important message you want to deliver to this evening's gathering to make sure they take and walk that out?
When you're in the community, in Walmart, Target, supermarket, you're going to see a veteran displaying the hat with their service, where they served at. Go out of your way and walk up and tell that veteran, thank you for your service. Don't think twice. Don't blink. Go and tell that veteran, thank you for your service. And watch how far that goes.
Thank you, Derrick. Pete, one final message, sir.
Treat yourself like someone who deserves your help. I think I said that before, but someone told me that a long time ago. And it really struck home with me. And I'm always about people pleasing and helping everybody else around me. It's part of what I do. But it took me a long time to realize that. Treat yourself like someone who deserves your help. And as a veteran, I think you deserve that.
Thanks, Pete. It is all about self-care, isn't it? Last word, too, please.
So you are the creators of your own reality. So no matter how hard life gets, you have a choice. So choose. Choose to be successful, even though the odds are stacked against you. Choose to turn your pain into purpose, your wounds into wisdom, and your actions into kindness. Live a life of purpose, and that's found through your pain.
Thank you, too. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank these men.